Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 53 of IGEL Weekly. I'm your host this week, Andy Whiteside. I've got my other host, Patrick Toner, on. Patrick, how's it going?
It's going good, Andy. Nice to be here. I think I was telling you I'm out still down at the Jersey Shore in transit to Florida, and we have some beautiful Irish weather down here. It's pouring out. So yeah, just enjoying the breeze and the scenery.
So I sent you and Chris an email 30 minutes ago saying, hey, I can't make it today. Can you run this? And I called Patrick. He said, yeah, I'm setting up my office in this makeshift garage. I'm like, oh, I better jump on the podcast.
Yeah, it's actually it's kind of peaceful out here. So there's no electrical outlet, so it's nice because I can have my phone as my hotspot, I have my laptop as my device, and working pretty well.
Man, that is the epitome of work has no boundaries, work from anywhere, hybrid work, sell your house, go live in a garage for a month and still get work done. That's it, right? That's the good side of the digital workspace EUC hybrid world that we're living in. We're going to talk about the other side of it in a second. Chris Spini, what's going on in your world?
Oh man, it feels like it's been like a year since I was last on here. I apologize for missing a few, but all good. I mean, it's been a busy, last month with had our son graduate college and doing that and celebrating that, and then just kind of getting vacation plans kind of squared away, and then some work travel. So it's been busy, got a lot of things going on, and then just trying to get some work done in between. But
you know what, I was thinking, I was on vacation last week and I was thinking about the fact that it used to be that when kids got out of school, there was a month or two or three where it was summer and things slowed down. I honestly think we've flipped that over and things get more accelerated during the summer season now because we're trying to do vacations and we're trying to work and we're trying to get as much in as we can. I think in the long run, I think for the psyche of the human being, I think we're screwing up. But I love to work, so I'm going to keep doing it anyway.
Yeah, and just we eat our own dog food here, right? I mean, the fact that Patrick is, literally running off a battery in a hotspot in an ocean front view, I'm sure probably not, but
that would be nice, but no.
That would be nice, right? But
I can see my neighbor's garage. There's
that's
a small puddle of water building between with the rain, so it's kind of like waterfront.
The fact is, he's able to, and it's just that freedom, that flexibility. I mean, like, I know my wife's a teacher, so when school's out, she'd love to go anywhere she can, beach preferably, and I'm okay if I just go and I work from the beach, right? Maybe a few days R&R, but not being tethered to an office is really freeing. But anyway.
Is it freeing or is it somewhat an entrapment all at the same time?
It's all of the above.
It's
all perspective, right? And balance.
Yeah.
So,
well, let's talk about today's topic. The blog that we've chosen from the corporate IGEL site is Easily Navigate EUC Industry Turbulence with IGEL OS. And I think that's an interesting topic because we need stable things in a scenario where there's lots of turbulence in the digital workspace / EUC / VDI world. And with Citrix being bought by private equity and moving towards a world where maybe it's more focused on their core things, VMware being sold by Dell or spun off by Dell and then bought by private equity bought by another company, and no one being sure if they're going to stay true to what they've been doing for all these years, especially around the EUC side of things. It's really important to have partners like XenTegra, like IGEL, third-party ecosystem partners that are continuing to add value and helping customers get what they need out of the solutions. And I think that's really what Dan O'Farrell's talking about in this blog, isn't it?
Yeah, it's because you think I was thinking about this, companies are making decisions, especially if they're going to, subscription gives them flexibility, right? I'll just do it for 1 year, but maybe they go 3 or whatever. They're, depending on the industry, they're making change. They don't want to continually do changes. They'd rather have something that allows them flexibility if they're letting something expire and replacing it with something else. But at the end of the day, being able to have something that can allow the user to switch seamlessly to some other thing, and just maintain continuity. And obviously IGEL fits into that very well here. So.
Oh, and is that because of IGEL? Is that because of Linux? What's the technical reason why IGEL is a stable piece in this in this industry?
I think several fronts. As far as access to, we have all the ways to get there, browser, clients, that type of thing, to whatever environment, the major ones being out there, but then some that are not so major, but a lot of flexibility there. That's one thing. It is a focused endpoint operating system, and built on a great user experience, but the ability to also not be tethered to specific hardware to run on. We can cover the gamut on a lot of different options, giving flexibility to customers in terms of where they ultimately spend their money. And you'll hear a lot about, you probably already have, sustainability, right? I mean, a green approach. Your nonprofit is a big example of that. In fact, I probably have a couple laptops I need to ship your way for that reason. Give it an extra set of life for somebody that doesn't need necessarily a ton of horsepower, just needs a browser, whatever, get to something, check email, whatever. But that flexibility IGEL offers is also a big piece of this. So that's my short answer, sort of.
Patrick, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's like similar to what Chris was saying, right? But it's IGEL is pretty well positioned right now with all of this. I mean, not just from a technical standpoint, but also just from IGEL knowing their space in the market, being an operating system that's purpose built to connect to other backend things like desktop as a service or VDI, and having the partnerships in place already with Citrix, VMware, Microsoft with ABD, obviously Amazon workspaces, and then even the other ones, Tanix Frame, Parallels. I mean, there's all of the built-in agents are there, and all of the relationships are there with the IGEL Ready program. So I think if you're an admin, and maybe you're a Citrix shop, you're a VMware shop, and you're looking at some of the trends, you're going, I don't know which way this is going to go right now. You're really well positioned because those other agents are there. So if AVD over the next 5 years or 10 years, whatever happens, if they become the new trend, people are really moving to them. An innovator like a Nerdio being kind of side by side, you're already positioned for that. And I think that's really IGEL kind of knows they're exactly who they are in the market. They're not trying to be anything other than that. And I think that's where it's a really nice fit.
Yeah. Well, and I have a couple thoughts on that. Okay, so first of all, Dan has 4 bullets here. Is it secure? Is it manageable at scale? Is it providing a good or great end user experience to a highly distributed hybrid workforce? I threw the word hybrid in there because sometimes everybody's in the office. Sometimes some of the people in the office. Sometimes nobody's in the office. Sometimes it's a mix. And does it reduce capital cost and management costs associated with hardware, which is still a necessary evil, no matter whether it's BYOD or company owned? If you're hitting the mark on those 4 things, you're probably going to be able to be flexible as companies evolve and change on the provider side, as well as on the subscriber side. If you make a decision, hey, we're now moving to AVD or Amazon workspaces, or we're going from VMware back to Citrix or Citrix back to VMware, that investment you're making, because it's software defined and checks those boxes, really won't be a waste. The other part I would say in all that is, I'm amazed that it's only, you got Windows, Microsoft Windows, and then literally there are only 3 other players ish that even care about trying to own that endpoint world in terms of PC form factor. And that would be IGEL, Stratadesk potentially, Google potentially. But it seems like a world that if you just carve those pies up into 4 different chunks, everybody would be happy. It's not an area where technology companies are focusing. Other technology companies.
Yeah. And I think, the top 2 bullets, Andy, to your, to what you were just saying, You know, why the IGELs of the world and Stratus and the Googles are there is because those two, right? You can't really manage Windows. I mean, I know Intune is, you know, being pushed, but you know, it's not going to be able to be managed at scale the same way because Windows is doing so many other things. And of course, from a security standpoint, you're just not going to have, you know, you're not going to have the success you would have with something like IGEL with that lockdown read-only OS and being Linux on the back end. It's just a much more secure solution. So
Well, the attack vector is so much smaller. And let's be honest, you can make Windows really secure, but you're really working hard to get it done, potentially neutering what makes Windows great to begin with. You know, why bother?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I was just thinking through each of these bullet points in sort of a comparison to running Windows on the endpoint versus IGEL, for example. You know, there's obviously a lot of solutions out there. Bullet point 1, secure from malware, other endpoint threats. There's a lot of solutions out there that are designed to protect it. And some of them have automatic mitigation components. If something happens, they can begin doing whatever. And I've been talking with, you know, various customers that have these tools or whatever like that. And in some industries, they're afraid to turn it on because of what may happen. And what does that mean? Well, it could, bullet point 3, that user experience may get impacted while they're dealing with it. You know, then take a larger operating system to try to manage that at scale and push it out and updates and that type of thing. You know, all these things begin to add up over time. And if you can have that same experience, but, you know, it's running Windows, streaming it, whatever, from a data center that's very secure. You know, our point is, why do you need to run it in 2 locations? Just have it at 1. So, yeah, it's interesting. And then obviously, you know, who's really able to talk to some of this, right? I had my first Disrupt conference last week, and it really is. It's called End User Computing Forum. It's there as an educational kind of thing, what's going on in the world that we live in. And obviously, you know, the big players, there's about a lot of disruption going on there with both VMware and Citrix. So IGEL seems to be in a really good place to be able to address some of these concerns and provide some of that stability.
I want to ask you guys a question. My long-term thought here is the big winners in this EUC space are going to be the ones that own the hyperscaler side of the equation. Now, the others are still going to win. I think Citrix grows, VMware grows. VMware is interesting because they kind of have a hyperscaler on top of other people's hardware. But I think the old days of thinking, okay, whoever owned the hypervisor was going to have a leg up on everybody else, that was somewhat true. But then what I think we're really going to see is those who own the hyperscalers, in other words, public cloud IaaS, are going to have the leader. They're going to be the leader for the EUC workloads. And then if that's not good enough, then you're going to have the bolt-ons like the Citrixes and the VMwares. But I think AWS, Microsoft, and to a much distant third, Google, owning those hyperscalers is going to have the first shot at that EUC/digital workspace workload. What do you guys think as far as that and how that may be playing into this disruption here?
Yeah, I think we're already seeing that a little bit, Andy. I mean, you look at a lot of our Citrix customers, you know, have already been moving, you know, they're running Citrix in Azure, right? They're using Azure as their hyperscaler. Their VMs live there, their application data lives there. But they're still running Citrix. They're using Citrix, HDX, and they have Citrix, in my opinion, at the moment has the best peripheral support and device support and all the different virtual channels that they have. VMware's close. They're kind of neck and neck, but it's like, I think we've already started seeing that trend. The days of so many people like, just I want to get my stuff out of my data center, get rid of that bill. I'll just pay monthly to Microsoft. So in that scenario, to your point, Microsoft wins either way, whether you're running Citrix or Azure Virtual Desktop. Your VMs are living in Azure in that scenario. They're still winning.
Right. Well, and a quick XenTegra plug, we're building out our own data centers. Currently, we have 2. My goal is to have 3 or 4. A lot of our competitors are moving totally to public cloud IaaS. I think having our own hyperscaler private version of it is going to give us an inside track to helping a lot of customers that are going to have unique needs, whether it's technology needs or cost needs. I think 100% going all in on public cloud is a potential limiter in the future as far as controlling your destiny and your customers' ability to have the solutions they need.
Yeah, it seems like it's a circular trend, right? It used to be, hey, you have this huge mainframe computer and everybody connects to it, and it's kind of come full circle. You wonder if in 10 years there'll be a trend to go back to private data centers. It's an interesting thought.
Well,
We've already
the
seen
thought I
it
have
doing
there
that.
is if trust or some access is cut off to these public cloud, these infrastructures. I mean, we've seen things come up, right, where some change occurs at somebody makes a DNS change. I'll just, use that as an example. And somehow AWS goes down or a portion of their, like what was it, an actual, something happened, right? And all of a sudden you lose access. I mean, it does beg the question, if your business is down and you literally cannot work, you can't serve your customers, maybe I should consider another option, right? And so all these things come out and play. I think you'll have some of that, but I also think there's tremendous redundancy built in for those things in those public data centers as well. But
So Dan,
costs. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Andy.
Dan asked a question here. What percentage of workloads will go into public cloud? I think the actual real way to ask it is what percentage of customers will move everything into public cloud. And if that number is anything, I think it's going to be single digits, maybe, I don't know, 20, 30%, maybe gets 100% public cloud. What are those others going to do that need that flexible option? Well, that's where private cloud options or, your own data center, I don't think it goes away. Not in my career, not for 100% of the companies.
I agree. I think, there's costs. If you look at some of the, like I was listening to Nerdio present last week, one of the things from a cost savings perspective, and I actually experienced a little bit of this over the weekend. I've got some VMs running 24/7 in Azure, and I decided, let me add another VM, and then I shut it down. Well, that little setting it up and then shutting it down and still having it on my account pushed me over my credit limit, and it literally said, sorry, and it automatically shut my other VMs down. And one of the things that Nerdio was talking about how is if a device goes down, that can actually shift it over to less expensive disk space or disks or whatever. And then when it comes back up, switch it back over. So the ability to kind of handling costs that way, that's one thing that, whereas from a private data center, Andy, I'm not a data center guru, but I can imagine, the ability to be able to compete better on cost savings or whatever it might be would be a way that I would consider having a hybrid approach, right? Public as well as private, anyways, I'm interested to hear more about what you're doing there. With those.
I think you've mentioned several times the key term here, and forget about technology and abilities and uptime and downtime, all very important stuff. Costs. I mean, how do you control your own destiny from a cost perspective unless you put a little in one public cloud and a little in a different cloud, whether that's another public or some type of private. And as you need to scale up or down, you can weigh your cost model in either or both simultaneously so that you control your own destiny. Either one of you guys have an electric car?
No.
So most people I know that have an electric car, they have a gas car and they have an electric car. A friend of mine I saw last week at the beach, 7 hours away from home. Guess what? He drove his gas car. He didn't drive his electric car to the Outer Banks of North Carolina. He needed that option. He needed that flexibility where he can walk out. And then this morning, his car is here in the office. He drove his electric car 20 minutes, 30 minutes to the office. But when he needs to drive to the Outer Banks from Charlotte, North Carolina, he didn't drive his electric car. He needs options. He needs choice. And it wasn't a technical choice. It was a cost choice.
Yeah, that's actually, so with Darren, one of your guys down in Miami, I saw him a few weeks ago in Tampa, and he was going to drive, Alligator Alley or whatever they call it over to Tampa, but he couldn't make it all the way when he started his journey, his battery wasn't all filled up on the Tesla, from what I recall.
Mhm.
And so he had to stop somewhere along the way, fill up the tank, if you will. And then, of course, Tesla, depending on the subscription you have, you get the fast charging option, or it's a little slower, kind of like how your Apple charger, can change based on whatever. But yeah, and I was like, well, what is the actual range on that? 300 miles? Is it 200 reliably? I mean, I don't know.
Right. Well, that's what's holding me back. Every time my brother comes to see me from Richmond, where he's going to charge and when he's going to charge is a big part of the family dinner conversation.
I'm
At least
sure.
at least for now, I just want to know I can stop and get gas.
Yeah, it is,
My phone, I woke up this morning, it was 20% charged. I didn't plug it in properly last night. That's my phone. I can go plug it into the office. I can't plug my car into the office.
yeah.
Sorry, Patrick, you want to say something?
No, I was just saying, it's a great analogy because it's, talking about the electric versus gas, just needing options. I mean, we're seeing kind of what we're talking about today, right? With just all of the uncertainty. Hey, which way is this going to go? Because these are great conversations. We can speculate, and it's, who knows how this is going to go. I mean, obviously, in our space here in the EUC, I mean, obviously Microsoft, you would think, would have the big advantage here, being that they create, they run the operating system. Everybody needs to run in the cloud or in a data center. But, I think it's just, we're highlighting a lot of the uncertainty, a lot of the, discussion that many people are having, that a lot of different organizations are having. Hey, which way is this going to go? But the point is, overall of this article is like, hey, if you standardize on a technology like IGEL, you're going to be safe no matter which way this thing goes, right? If Microsoft, if AVD takes off, and this is very unlikely, but let's say one of these other organizations, they just completely gut their EUC practice and they go down the tubes, like, you have the ability to make the switch and keep your endpoints in place. There's not a lot of disruption. And I think it's really, it's really in a world where things really are uncertain, it's nice to have that stability, at least in one place. It's like, okay, we can flip a switch and we're up and running no matter which way this thing goes.
Yeah, 100%. You need to be able to, like, look, we've seen it. You guys have probably seen it, right? Where you go into a company that's moving from product A to product B for the EUC. They were sold into this madness called zero clients that locked you in, which is really the big play behind zero clients. It was a gimmick from day one. You basically just took a lean operating system, stripped out all the competitors, and called it a zero client, and marketed it as something special, and it really wasn't. We've seen a lot of places where you have to go in and you have to get all those units out and replace it with something else. IGEL, other than Windows, IGEL is the only other one that really can give you that ubiquitous layer at the endpoint, so that conversation isn't an ugly one a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now.
Yeah, no, I think about that last point you just made. The first few opportunities I worked on when I came to IGEL a few years ago were customers that had been locked into that zero client of choice. Generally speaking, Teradici, for example, and just getting to VMware more specifically, but just seeing that change when VMware went to blast and the reasons why, and here they are kind of milking 7 years on this device, but they're facing we got to make a choice, and the reason why they even looked at us was because we offered that option to them, maintain status quo, also give them flexibility if they ever make a switch to some other technology. Right. Yeah, I mean, but unfortunately, those Teradici devices definitely had to get replaced. So can't really do things on the sustainability piece there, but there is a lot of flexibility with options with the IGEL Ready program, which I'm excited about, because it just, that continues to grow the ecosystem. And I love working with our partners and trying out their technologies, and just, making it just work. At the end of the day, check this box, plug in, start with whatever, and it just works.
Yeah. well, taking this whole conversation and kind of wrapping it up and getting someone's feedback, that would be super important. At the end of the day, you know, you bring out that ransomware, that security card, and pretty much eliminate, not 100%, almost 100%, pretty much eliminate the ability to get attacked at the endpoint. And that's kind of like, you know, that trump card where you just trump everything else that could be used as a, I'm not interested. And all of a sudden, everyone should be interested in a secure Linux, read-only, controlled, managed scenario. I don't know about you guys. It's very rare that I find someone that last little bit of security conversation doesn't at least force the conversation to play itself out.
Oh yeah. I mean, whether it's, I'm not ready to pull the plug and go all in yet, but knowing maybe I'll start with a disaster recovery option and IGEL being part of that, maybe AVD or whatever as well. But at some point, when are you going to cross the threshold and just say, why don't I just make this my more permanent solution?
Yep.
And I'm grateful for you guys, because you guys get it, you understand that, and certainly appreciate you bringing IGEL into the conversation when the opportunity presents itself.
Yeah, it's funny. I talk to people every once in a while that try to talk to us about doing that, whether it's IGEL or Nutanix or what have you. And I'm like, obviously you don't listen to the podcast. You don't have to sell us. We came and found you.
Yeah. No, I'm just agreeing.
Yeah. Well, guys, any other thoughts on this topic of the turbulence in the industry and where stable players like IGEL are going to help make us all a little better getting through it?
No, I think we kind of really covered a lot of it. I would say anyone listening, if they're interested in, if you haven't looked at IGEL, or you're maybe listening to this for the first time, you want to take a look, reach out to us at XenTegra. We can help you. We actually have a cloud hosted environment. We can help run there's a real simple POC for you, and see it work, because I think especially all of these things we're talking about are really what's driving the market. And I think if you haven't looked at it, you really should, because there's really no better time than now to start to hedge your bets and get something a little more stable in your environment to be able to move wherever the market's going. So that's right. Shameless plug there, but.
And that move can be quick, as we've talked about. It could be slow. It could be a hybrid. That's the beauty of it.
Yep.
All right, guys. Well, I appreciate it. And Chris, good to have you back on. Patrick, thank you for hosting some of the other ones. I've been kind of MIA as well, and we'll get this one posted, and we'll keep adding value. I guess I will make a quick shameless plug. I will be at IGEL Disrupt DC, and then eventually New York. I will be there not as XenTegra, but as XenBlocks, which is my TCO alternative hyperconverged solution for making VMware and Citrix end-user compute on-premises environments much more cost-effective and easy. So I'm looking forward to seeing people there. Hopefully, if you come by, just mention that you listen to the podcast. That'd be great. Chris, anything from your side?
I think I will probably see you there as well. So
I'm driving up tomorrow. If you want me to swing by and pick you up on the way.
You are driving?
I don't have a choice. I've got a 70-pound server I got to take with me. I'm looking to work with other vendors.
Let's chat offline, because I'm looking at either a flight or whatever. But I wouldn't. If you need, let's chat offline. That might work.
Okay. All right, Patrick. Anything from your side?
I was just wondering if you're going to take that up in a gas or electric vehicle.
I've seen this truck.
The conversation. Yeah, not an electric truck.
Well, and this is okay. So this is a really interesting conversation to go along with this. I don't have an electric vehicle yet. I am looking to get a golf cart at some point for local around town stuff. I have an F-150 that sucks a lot of gas. So what do I do in this scenario? I go out and rent a car for 3 days.
Wise choice.
Yeah.
I have a Silverado, but it's a hybrid. I could put ethanol in it, which lately I've been doing because it's $3.50 a gallon or something. So,
wow.
Anyway, by the way, last thing, June 14th, Flag Day. So don't forget it. Put a flag out if you got one. God bless America.
Perfect. All right, guys. Thank you.
All right, fellas.
Hey, thanks, everybody.